Guten Tag. My name is Chris Steineger, and I'm formerly a state senator from Kansas in the American Midwest. My involvement with the green movement in the U.S. goes all the way back to my university days when I first discovered photovoltaic cells and solar energy, and also recycling. I'm now here in Germany teaching at Humboldt University, teaching young German students about the American government and contemporary politics. Well, in the U.S., it's always important to know for German students or German audiences that although we have a national government in Washington, the truth is the 50 American states have more control over domestic policy and are typically more the leaders in policy areas such as the environment. So, although Washington is slow in acting on environmental issues these days, different of the 50 states have made significant changes with their own domestic policy on everything from environmental standards such as renewable energy to motor vehicle efficiency to get higher gas economy for our cars, and even things to do with green building design of new construction of buildings and parks to establish more green spaces. So typically in the U.S., you see more leadership on all kinds of domestic issues from states and from cities, not so much from Washington, D.C. I think for the individual citizen, it doesn't matter American, German, or in any country, all social change begins with one individual. Always. This is the truth, whether it's Nelson Mandela or Mohandas Gandhi. Change begins with one person. And so I think the individual can practice their own environmental ideas, such as reducing one's footprint, as we say in the U.S. Try and live a smaller lifestyle, a less impactive lifestyle. Your own self. Live in a smaller home, ride a bike, walk, don't drive cars. Just buy fewer consumer goods. I think this is one easy way, easy, simple, and cheap way for individuals to enact their own beliefs in trying to keep the environment more green. I think that in the U.S., there actually is quite a bit of agreement on many environmental issues. The agreement is more that indeed our world is changing, and indeed we Americans need to live a more sustainable lifestyle. Most Americans and politicians agree with that. We need to be more sustainable. The differences and the questions are in how do we achieve sustainability? Sustainability can include living within your financial means, living within your environmental means. And I think for the difference between the Democrat and Republican parties, Democrats are a little more aggressive in regulating business people, such as power plants, electrical power plants, automobile emissions, whereas the Republican Party wants to go a little bit slower on these issues. But still, the goal is the same, and I would say most Americans are united, mostly united. Well, in Kansas, it's a more of a Midwestern conservative state, so we're not the most green, to be quite honest. The most green parts of the U.S. are usually in the Northwest. Seattle, Portland, Oregon, the upper northwestern part of the U.S. tends to have the most green thinking people, along with, I would say, the Rocky Mountain states like Colorado, Idaho, Montana. States that have a lot of natural beauty tend to be a bit more green thinking. Kansas, we're a bit practical about it. One of the areas that Kansas is a national and even international leader is in wind energy. We are blessed to have a very high but steady wind speed in my state, and so we are erecting huge wind farms with hundreds of windmills that will generate as much electricity as a coal-fired power plant. So that's probably where Kansas is best leading. We're also a leader, I would say, in agricultural management practices. Back in the bad old days, we used excessive amounts of chemicals on our crops. And Kansas and other Midwestern ag states are getting better and better about reducing the amount of chemicals we use, and in some cases not using any at all. But practicing more sustainable agricultural techniques is probably where Kansas is also a leader. there's a lot that people can learn from each other all around the world, not just between Germans and Americans. I think for Americans to learn from Germans would be a bit more about self-control. Americans tend to be a bit less self-responsible. We certainly litter more than Germans do. Germans are much more responsible about keeping their home and their cities tidy. They don't throw trash on the ground. And there is a bit more of a self-conscious thinking amongst German people that they personally have a responsibility to the environment. So this is something we Americans need to learn. Some of us already have these ideas, but not enough of us do. And this is something we can learn from the Germans. For Germans learning from us, I would say that to have a little more trust sometimes in the free market and private business to solve problems. I think for some of the environmental issues in Germany, rather than the government setting a bunch of regulations, perhaps the government can set a goal and encourage businesses to go more green and let businesses, whether it's a large corporation or a small restaurant or a brew pub or even a school, let local people, local business people and local individuals find the best way to achieve the goals rather than having all kinds of government regulations.